Chapter 3. An Unpleasant Meeting. "What are your plans for this morning, Nancy?" her father asked at the breakfast table. "I thought I'd do a little shopping," she replied. Her eyes twinkled. "There's a dance coming up at the country club, and I'd like to get a new dress." "Then will you phone me about lunch? Or better still, how about eating with me, whether Mr. Rolstead comes or not?" "I'll be there," Nancy declared gaily. "All right, drop in at my office about 12:30. If Mr. Rolstead does accept my invitation, we'll try to find out something about Josiah Crowley's wills." Mr. Drew pushed back his chair. "I must hurry now, or I'll be late getting downtown." After her father had left, Nancy finished her breakfast, then went to the kitchen to help Hannah Gruen, who had already left the table. "Any errands for me?" Nancy asked. "Yes, dear, here's a list," the housekeeper replied, "and good luck with your detective work." Hannah Gruen gazed at the girl affectionately, and several thoughts raced through her mind. In school, Nancy had been very popular and had made many friends, but through no fault of her own she had made two enemies, Ada and Isabel Topham. This worried Hannah. The sisters, intensely jealous of Nancy, had tried to discredit her in positions she had held in school, but loyal friends had always sprung to Nancy's defense. As a result, Ada and Isabel had become more unpleasant than ever to Nancy. "Thanks for your encouragement," she said to Hannah a little later, giving her a hug. "Whatever you do, Nancy, beware of those Topham sisters. They'd be only too happy to make things difficult for you." "I promise to be on my guard." Before leaving the house, Nancy phoned the Turners. She was glad to hear that Judy had suffered no ill effects from her fall, but she was disappointed that the police had found no clue to the thieves who had stolen the silverware. "Please let me know if you learn anything," Nancy said, and Edna promised to do so. Becomingly dressed in a tan cotton suit, Nancy set off in her convertible for the shopping district. She drove down the boulevard, and upon reaching the more congested streets, made her way skillfully through heavy traffic, then pulled into a parking lot. "I think I'll try Taylor's department store first for a dress," she decided. Taylor's was one of River Heights' finest stores. Nancy purchased several items for Hannah on the main floor, then went directly to the Mrs. Wearing Apparel section on the second floor. Usually Nancy had no trouble finding a sales clerk, but this particular morning seemed to be an especially busy one in the department, and an extra rush of customers had temporarily overwhelmed the sales force. Nancy sat down in a convenient chair to await her turn. Her thoughts wandered to the Turner sisters and little Judy. Would she be able to help them? She was suddenly brought out of her reverie by loud-voiced complaints. "We've been standing here nearly 10 minutes, a shrill voice declared. "Send a saleswoman to us immediately." Nancy turned to see Ada and Isabel Topham speaking to the floor manager. "I'm afraid I can't," the man replied regretfully. "There are a number of others ahead of you. All our salespeople are—" "Perhaps you don't know who we are," Ada interrupted rudely. "Indeed I do," the floor manager told her wearily. "I will have a saleswoman here in a few moments. If you will only wait—" "We're not accustomed to waiting," Isabel Topham told him icily. "Such service," Ada chimed in. "Do you realize that my father owns considerable stock in Taylor's? If we report your conduct to him, he could have you discharged." "I'm sorry," the harassed man apologized, "but it is a rule of the store. You must await your turn." Ada tossed her head and her eyes flashed angrily. This did nothing to improve her looks. In spite of the expensive clothes she wore, Ada was not attractive. She was very thin and sallow, with an expression of petulance. Now that her face was distorted with anger, she was almost ugly. Isabel, the pride of the Topham family, was rather pretty, but her face lacked character. She had acquired an artificially elegant manner of speaking which, although irritating, was sometimes amusing. It was her mother's ambition that Isabel marry into a socially prominent family. "I pity any future husband of hers," Nancy thought with a chuckle. Suddenly Ada and Isabel saw Nancy, who nodded a greeting. Isabel coldly returned the nod, but Ada gave no indication that she had even noticed Nancy. At that moment, a saleswoman hurried toward the Topham sisters. At once they began to shower abuse upon the young woman for her failure to wait on them sooner. How rude! "What is it you wish to look at, Miss Topham?" the clerk said, flushing. "Evening dresses." The saleswoman brought out several dresses. Nancy watched curiously as the Tophams, in an unpleasant frame of mind, tossed aside beautiful models with scarcely a second glance. They found fault with every garment. "This is a very chic gown," the saleswoman told them hopefully, as she displayed a particularly attractive dress of lace and chiffon. "It arrived only this morning." Ada picked it up, gave the dress one careless glance, then tossed it into a chair as the distracted clerk went off to bring other frocks. The fluffy gown slipped to the floor in a crumpled mass. To Nancy's horror, Ada stepped on it as she turned to examine another dress. In disgust, Nancy went to pick it up. "Leave that alone!" Ada cried out, her eyes blazing. "Nobody asked for your help." "Are you buying this?" Nancy asked evenly. "It's none of your business." As Nancy continued to hold the dress, Ada, in a rage, snatched it from her hands, causing a long tear in the chiffon skirt. "Oh!" Isabel cried out. "Now you've done it! We'd better get out of here, Ada." "And why?" her haughty sister shrilled. "It was Nancy Drew's fault. She's always making trouble." "It was not my fault," Nancy said. "Come on, Ada," Isabel urged, "before that clerk gets back." Reluctantly, Ada followed Isabel out of the department. As they rushed toward a waiting elevator, Nancy gazed after them. At this moment, the saleswoman reappeared with an armful of lovely frocks. She stared in bewilderment at the torn dress. "Where did my customers go?" she asked Nancy worriedly. Nancy pointed toward the elevator but made no comment. Instead, she said, "I'm looking for an evening dress myself. This torn one is very pretty. Do you think it could be mended?" "Oh, I don't know," the woebegone clerk wailed. "I'll probably be held responsible, and I can't afford to pay for the dress." "I'm sure tailors wouldn't ask you to do that," Nancy said kindly. "If there's any trouble, I'll speak to the manager myself. What usually happens is that such a dress is greatly reduced." "Thank you," the clerk replied. "I'll call Miss Reed, the fitter, and see what can be done." "First, let me try on the dress," Nancy said, smiling. They found a vacant fitting room, and Nancy took off her suit and blouse. Then she slipped the lovely pale blue dance creation over her head, and the saleswoman zipped it up. "It's darling on you," she said enthusiastically. Nancy grinned. "I kind of like myself in it," she said. "Please call the fitter now." Presently Miss Reed, a gray-haired woman, appeared. Within seconds she had made a change in an overlap of the chiffon skirt. The tear was no longer visible, and the style of the dress was actually improved. "I told our manager what happened," said the saleswoman. "If you want the dress, he will reduce the price 50%. "How wonderful!" Nancy exclaimed. Laughing, she said, "That price will fit into my budget nicely. I'll take the dress. Please send it." She gave her name and address. To herself she added, "Ada Topham did me a favor. But if she ever finds out what happened, she'll certainly be burned up." Nancy suppressed a giggle. "It's been a real pleasure waiting on you, Miss Drew," the saleswoman said after Miss Read left and Nancy was putting on her suit. "But how I dread to see those Topham sisters come in here. They're so unreasonable, and they'll be even worse when they get Josiah Crowley's money." The woman lowered her voice. "The estate hasn't been settled, but the girls are counting on the fortune already. Last week I heard Ada say to her sister, 'Oh, I guess there's no question about our getting old Crowley's fortune, but I wish Father would stop worrying that somebody is going to show up with a later will which may do us out of it.'" Nancy was too discreet to engage in gossip with the saleswoman, but she was interested and excited about the information. The fact that Mr. Topham was disturbed indicated to her that he too suspected Josiah Crowley had made a second will. The conversation reminded Nancy of her date. She glanced at her wristwatch and saw that it was after 12 o'clock. "I must hurry or I'll be late for an appointment with my dad," she told the saleswoman. Nancy drove directly to her father's office. Although she was a few minutes ahead of the appointed time, she found that he was ready to leave. "What luck, Dad?" Nancy asked eagerly. "Did Mr. Rolstead accept your luncheon invitation?" "Yes, we are to meet him at the Royal Hotel in 10 minutes. Do you still think I should quiz him about the Crowley will?" "Oh, I'm more interested than ever in the case," she told her father about the saleswoman's gossipy remarks. Said Mr. Drew. "It's not what you'd call evidence, but the old saying usually holds good. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Come, let's go." The Royal Hotel was located less than a block away, and Nancy and her father quickly walked the distance. Mr. Rolstead was waiting in the lobby. Carson Drew introduced his daughter, then the three made their way to the dining room where a table had been reserved for them. At first the conversation centered about a variety of subjects. As the luncheon progressed, the two lawyers talked enthusiastically of their college days together and finally of their profession. Nancy began to fear that the subject of the Crowley estate might never be brought up. Then, after the dessert course, Mr. Drew skillfully turned the conversation into a new channel and mentioned some strange cases which he had handled. "By the way," he said, "I haven't heard the details of the Crowley case. How are the Tophams making out? I understand other relatives are trying to break the will." For a moment Mr. Rolstead remained silent. Was he reluctant to enter into a discussion of the matter? Nancy wondered. Finally the lawyer said quietly, "The settlement of the estate wasn't given to me, Carson, but I confess I've followed it rather closely because of something that happened a year ago. As the present will stands, I do not believe it can be broken." "Then the Tophams fall heir to the entire estate," Mr. Drew commented. "Yes, unless a more recent will is uncovered." "Another will?" Carson Drew inquired innocently. "Then you believe Crowley made a second one?" Mr. Rolstead hesitated as though uncertain whether or not he should divulge any further information. Then, with a quick glance about, he lowered his voice and said, "Of course, this is strictly confidential." Until next time, love you.